Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to be replacing the gear in my driver's side headlight motor. So I found it easiest to just remove everything on the headlight, all the plastic and fiberglass, and this was just so that I didn't scratch the paint. Plus it just made it so much easier to get at the nut for removing the motor. So the nut is one of those steel locking nuts. It's on there pretty tight. It was a 13mm wrench. And now just carefully pull the motor out. Remove all the screws. And I used a large pry bar, plastic pry bar, to just very carefully spread the housing open. I worked my way around it. And there we go. Start removing everything. You're going to want to pay attention to where little wear washers. There's some wear washers. Very carefully pull the gear up. Now here are some little pads. You want to be careful not to lose these. There's 2 brass pads and 2 rubber pads. And this is to apply pressure on the shaft to keep the shaft in alignment. Very carefully pull everything out. Try not to lose anything. And just slip off the sleeve. It's a magnet. You can just pull it right off. And look how rusty that was. I'm going to use my ultrasonic cleaner. I'm going to use some Zep and some distilled water. I'm just going to hit it with the wire brush to loosen everything up and put it back in the solution. Alright, now it's done. So there's no bearings on that shaft. Actually, this side is rigid, it doesn't spin. So I was very comfortable submersing this. Now I'm just going to dry everything off. Yeah, there we go. Looks good. Alright, now time for reassembly. So there's 4 little screws that hold the board in. This is basically, that was the switch for the motor. There's 4 screws that hold that in. No need to over tighten these at all. My screws were really rusty, so I soaked them in some PB Blaster and it worked great. So now here, time to start to put the motor back together, the shaft and the magnet. And you just need to make sure there's a lot of alignment that needs to happen here. There's those 2 brass sleeves. You want the radius side down and the flat up. I'm going to put grease everywhere where there was grease when I took it apart. So the spring had a lot of grease on it. And here's something important. There's a little tab there, and that tab needs to align with the metal sleeve. You can see in the sleeve there's a little notch. You just have to line those up, and that keeps the sleeve stationary. And again, it's magnet, so just stick it together. Now here's where all the alignment needs to happen. The two brass pads, the brass washers by the spring, there's that piece right there that has to go into the switch. A lot of alignment, and then the notch, the tab and notch. I did have to compress the spring just a little bit to get it into that portion. I'm pushing down on the tabs just to spin the shaft and see if it feels good, and it does. Now time to grease the new motor. Yeah, so take a look at that. You can see how wore the old gear was. I'm not sure if all that slop is what caused my problem. You can see it's bulged a little bit. So I don't know if the bulging caused interference in a physical stoppage. I have no idea. The gear itself looked just fine. I'm greasing the rubber there to help slip this in. It did not want to go in without it being greased. Once I greased it, it went right in. Now again, we just grease everything. There was grease everywhere, and it was caked in there pretty good, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grease everything. Because the gears are plastic and the housing is plastic, you're going to want to use a silicone grease if you can. Now we're going to put the wear washer on. Thin little washers like that, those are designed for wear, or to prevent wear, or to protect metal on plastic. Here I'm just wiping away some of the excess grease to get out of the channel that I'm going to silicone. So this side of the housing has a V. I'll call it the female side, and the other side of the housing has the V, which is the male side. And we're going to silicone that channel, but I'll show you later. I'm just using a dab of grease to hold the pad in place. However, it probably would have made more sense to just stick these two little pads into the top of the housing versus what I'm doing here. End result's the same. Now there's a rubber piece for the back. This needs to get siliconed all the way around, so I'm just setting it on the shaft right now. I am not putting it into place. Again, we'll just grease everything. Now this gear is held in, this is a little more work to replace this gear. There's a double pin on each side of the shaft. You'll have to press one of those out. Now the double pin on the inside, where all the grease is, that's an odd double pin. I haven't quite figured out how it was designed. It might be easier to press the outside pin out. A lot more work and a lot more care needs to be taken if you have to replace that gear. Mine looks good, so I'm just keeping it in. I am not going to do any work that I don't have to. Alright, now we're going to silicone it. Now I just use an industrial silicone, one that works under all conditions, even oily and wet. And I'm going to silicone everywhere where there was silicone when I took it apart, which is basically the entire surface. So just want to put a thin bead. You don't want it to press inside and mess with the gears at all, so just a thin bead. You might have to wiggle the gear a little bit to get it to mesh. Once it meshes, it'll just pop right into place. And there we go. Now I'm just going to screw it back together, and that's it, guys. Wipe off some excess silicone before it dries. And there you go. Thanks for watching.